Welcome to another episode of How I'm Building This, where we interview startup founders that are in the thick of building their businesses. We learn from their mistakes and get practical tips to overcoming challenges. Today we have Kris from Mimoto. Hey Kris, how are you? Thank you so much for joining.
I am well. Thank you for offering the opportunity to talk with you.
Of course, thanks so much. Before we jump into the business, I'd love to learn, who's Kris? Where did you grow up? And what really got you into entrepreneurship?
I grew up in Pennsylvania, outside of Pittsburgh. I already forgot the rest of the question. I grew up outside of Pittsburgh. What got me into entrepreneurship? I had been for a long time an executive who was brought in to work with executives in who other founders who had interesting technology but hadn't taken off. And at some point, you do that enough times, and you realize that what you love is the build, and then it's why aren't you building on your own?
I see that. Yeah. Similarly, like for me, I think over my career, I've worked with a bunch of startups, and I absolutely love the build. And I think I've tried so many different, things that that haven't worked out, but here we are. But that said, though, Kris, growing up, was there like a pivotal moment or like any thoughts to that, when which you felt that, hey, one day I'm going to start my own thing?
Oh, I grew up in a much different place. I grew up under the steel mills.
Understood.
So the majority of people who I went to high school with didn't go to college, at least not right away. So we had maybe 60% that went to university. I think there's more that had gone back, but I wasn't in a place where that was important, but it was in my family.
Understood.
It was something that my parents were incredibly supportive. There were two of us. I was the younger of the two, and it was more of being self-sufficient, and getting a good education to be self-sufficient was the focus. And so I had gone to school in Pennsylvania, and then had decided that I was leaving from the very beginning. But went to school in Pennsylvania and really spent the time while I was in university trying not to say planning my escape. So ask me when I found out you could leave Pittsburgh, or when you leave Pittsburgh.
When did you leave Pittsburgh?
When I found out you were allowed to leave. It's a bad joke, but it's kind of true. I had planned that. So my point was to move to California and Silicon Valley because I wanted to work internationally, and I wanted to work on new concepts and new innovation. And that was the starting point. Once I was here and I started working and realized what was being created, that's what really got me into the building mindset. In the beginning, it was just taking my skills and being able to do it in an interesting place. I am working on interesting things. And then from there, it evolved into wanting to be the builder itself.
Amazing. Wow. So talking about building, I saw on LinkedIn that you all have been building since about September of 2020. Are you bootstrapped or
yeah?
Have you raised some venture?
We incorporated in that time frame.
Okay, got it.
We started building in 2021 and we started building in 2021, and then by about I'm trying to figure out now time frame wise. In fact, I realized I misquoted myself recently to someone because I had said we had an MVP. And I realized from talking to you that was really just our building phase. But we had, in that time frame, it was evolved, I'm going to say. We had an initial version, and then which we thought we would be limited and then raise. And what we found is that we really needed a larger product. So to date, we have raised pre-seed,
Okay.
some of that venture, some
Okay.
of it angel, some of it venture.
That's awesome. What is the toughest thing of being funded by outside investors?
Um, I'm going to be different than most people. I don't mind being funded by outside venture. The the most difficult thing is finding the right fit. Finding the right fit makes it a lot easier. Finding the right person for the journey, both for the correct vision that
Sure.
matches yours, but also the people who will challenge, even if you're doing well, who will challenge and say, you've done all this. How can we, how are you pushing it even further? How can we push it even further? So I find that incredibly valuable. I think sometimes people get hung up on the money or even the reputation
Got
of
it.
the investor, and they sometimes take people who are not mentally aligned with them. And I mean, you and I probably have gone into so many companies where you're doing turnaround, and part of the thing you're doing turnaround for is that there's just a misalignment
Yeah.
between the VCs and the founders.
Absolutely. I've seen that quite a few times. So that being said, though, from your perspective, what were some of like your decision making, points, call it, that helped you to like decide that these were some of the investors that you truly wanted to work with, besides them, being in line with you, their vision aligning. Was there something else to it?
Um, I think it's how much they're engaged. One of the things that as a founder, you never want to hear someone say they don't have conviction in what you're
Yes.
doing. And at the same time, if you flip it the other way, do you want somebody who's not excited about what you're doing?
Absolutely.
And it is, but that's really hard, and it's still confusing as all get out. And you're like, why can you not be excited about this? This is incredible. Why are you not excited about this? But if somebody's just going through the motions, then that's a really difficult thing to deal with. And at the same time, they're right in that if they're not excited about you, they shouldn't be involved, because they're only going to be painful for you in the future.
That's so true. Yeah. I'd love to get your take on like hiring, especially early hires. You've been part of like a few turnarounds, part of a few builds. When you are hiring, not only at your past employers but also today, what are some of those things that you're looking for in those early hires?
I have two examples of things that have happened here. One is we have a um, uh, we have a process that has I'm often the last step, the last station on the
Got it.
train, and on the hiring process, if it's not a hire specific for me. And I am often the second cultural fit. We have a process of there has to be two people who are looking at culture. And so if it's my hire and I'm looking at culture, I need somebody else to be
Yeah.
doing that. At some point, we will be large enough that I don't need to be involved with all of it. But there always has to be two people signing off on culture, because the first person may be so excited and so in need of that hire that they may okay some rough edges that don't
I
quite
see that.
fit. So that's one thing that we've been really has been really important to us. And we're a remote first company. In fact, the plan was to be remote first with collaboration centers, and no one's near each other. And so really we're a remote company, and so it becomes even more important. So that's one. The second thing is that um, it is, for us at least, it's really important that the person is excited about the problem that we're solving. We had a hire recently where there were two candidates in the end. And I had heard about both candidates. Both candidates had sounded great. I kept hearing how this one candidate was incredibly enthusiastic and was incredibly enthusiastic. And it came up again and again when I would hear about it. And one of the things that I had said after I met both candidates was, I said, I think we're holding the level of what's enthusiasm. We're holding a bar that my co-founder could not pass. My co-founder is a quiet person who's incredibly excited about the problem and does incredible work and is massively enthusiastic, but is a quiet man.
Understood.
And when they looked at it, the person we hired is very enthusiastic, but is also a quiet man. In this case, he happens to be a man. But the point was that he's very quiet, but incredibly excited about the problem. And we never had in our hiring, we've had a lot of things that like, these are the things that work well. We never had they need to be excited about the problem. Now, often that happened, and in data science, that definitely happened, but we never had that as we need that to be a requirement for somebody coming in. And it's too early to say if that's a requirement across the board, but I would say it is a requirement in the engineering side and in the data science side. And it's something that's something we've learned in the last 6 months. That is incredibly important to have somebody who's enthusiastic about the problem.
As a remote first company, how are you building culture, especially in this day and age where quite a few businesses have gone hybrid?
We're always continuing to look for new ways. Some of the things we've done is we use Gather. That's what it's called. Is that what it's called? Now that yep, it's Gather. We use Gather, which is a virtual office space.
Got it.
So somebody comes in and it enables people to interact in real time. It looks like a 80s or 90s game, the avatars in it. So we use that, which enables us to be a little more in real time, in real time and more casual. So that's one. We have implemented recently a all hands meeting that is part demo, part not, and it is not everyone presenting, because it sometimes that comes across more as like dance for the king and queen. So it is one department spends 15 minutes presenting. So there's a 45-minute meeting. There's always an icebreaker.
Okay.
The silly icebreakers are better than not. The last icebreaker was, if you were a potato, what potato would you be and why? It's not an original. Somebody gave it to me. There's a quick update. There's one department that's doing 15 minutes of an update.
Got it. And
then there's another like 10 minutes at the end for AMA. And that is having us just together more is good. We do that are cross functional. We do huddles on the technical side, so that there's a 1 hour or so a day where everyone is coding or working at this in the same virtual space. And then other than that, there's a few other things that we will introduce soon. Like we'll start introducing Donut, so that we have cross-functional coffees.
Amazing.
But that's at least the starting point of where we are.
Well, for sure. That is so comprehensive compared to most other companies.
It came up as a concern because it probably should have been a concern for anyone, but we have some people who they're in their first out of college job.
Got it. Okay.
And at one point, when we were in fact back in 2020 and 2021, when we first founded, it was someone had recommended that we don't hire new people who were early in their career, because one of the benefits that you get in your career when you're that early just in general, is you're walking down a hallway and you're hearing people talk, and there's just things that you start learning just from being around people.
Absolutely.
And how we wouldn't be able to support them. And so that was why the gather part was good, because you can actually hear people talking.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, so you can have it where you really are interacting in a office setting. And so that was a starting point. But then about 6 months ago, somebody had said that they were feeling very connected to the people they're working with, but very out of touch with the overall. And so that's why we started looking at, like, well, how can we have it so that we are having more people interact?
I see that. Interesting. Well, Kris, on your website, you say, and I'm just quoting here, you say person-based continuous recognition to protect you and your customers.
Yes.
What is the pain you're solving and for whom?
So the pain we're solving is that the a person being impersonated within
Okay.
a system is one of the main ways that that there is that a bad actor will get in, or there'll be malicious activity without people realizing it. So specifically, the areas that we fall into are KYN, which is Know Your Customer, DLP, Data Loss Prevention, regulatory, as well as coming up in the soon to come will be AI governance as well. But ultimately, what we're doing is we're recognizing when somebody's being impersonated. So what that specifically ends up addressing is things like if if there were a breach that came in through the software supply chain as a dependency, that normally would go unrecognized.
Okay.
It's continuous validation. So anything coming in that way, if it came in through a reverse shell, all that bypasses authentication. What we're doing is not looking at a credential. We're actually looking at it as a specific person. It also enables us, because we're doing pattern matching and non-anomaly detection, we don't have all the false positives that anomaly detection has. And we still are able to provide context. So if you and I were on the same admin account, we would know it was me using the admin account.
Wow.
Or if you and I were both in the same admin account, but it was John, who is neither of us, we would know that it was either a profile that we know or it was a third party. And so that is the areas that we fall into.
Why is this pain so important to you?
I believe that we have been fortunate to date that there has not been a larger loss of life or a significant impact because somebody has gotten into something that they shouldn't have and either hijacked it or changed it or held it hostage. I have a background in crisis communication. And so knowing who it is and as opposed to who you think it is core to that.
Well, that is so interesting. Kris, how did you go about finding your first few customers that were willing to pay you to solve their problem?
As in the beginning, it was talking about what we do to people and the shortcutting it a bit with figuring out fairly quickly what the who's the best ICP and who's the best persona in that ICP, and then testing it out.
Yeah.
So starting to do the can I tell you what we're doing? Is that of interest? And then, but really honing in on what the problem is. The problem is, what is the ongoing problem? In our case, we saw it as there's all this gatekeeping that happens, but there's still the problem internally. So so we're going to look at it and look at that problem but they're still in there. So how are they getting in there? And then looking at, again, in our case, looking at, well, who's the one who's cleaning up the mess? Who's responsible not for the locks, but who is responsible for actually dealing with the this is a mess and I can't keep having this mess. And that was the good way in for us.
Wow.
I tend to find if there's a budget, that's a good way in.
Yeah.
And if it's the who is getting the hit the hardest with the problem, and that's how we initially got in.
So how did you validate the ICP? Was it just reaching out to your initial, like your closed network, or was it going cold and and validating with like completely cold prospects, or was it a combination
Um,
of both?
it's never been a cold prospect for me.
Huh.
Um, I'd been in go-to-market before, and so it had never been a totally cold prospect. Even now, so much of our demand gen program is either at conferences,
Okay.
and not with booths, but more of free range at conferences because we're still early,
Yeah.
or it's been referrals from existing customers. And so for those initial customers, it was, part of it was those initial angel investors that we had asking, who did they know who fit this profile? So we had a hypothesis of a profile. So even before we built, we interviewed people before we built, as you should. I don't think we asked all the right questions.
Okay.
We asked questions that were, we didn't rank where they were and how important, and that is really important. So once we found where the problem was that wasn't getting solved, that we could address, and what's even now, when I look at what we do, we have a very tight wedge in that is very unique to what we do. It's not that we can't do all these other things, but the tight wedge in that's very unique to us is a really good way in because there isn't a lot of other options.
I see that. So, from your perspective, like being the resident, and a go-to-market expert here, what are some tactics that you used before that didn't really work?
Um, well, so let me talk about that, but let me talk about there's one other part I want to make sure I
Oh,
get to
sure.
cover also. So the buying too much sponsorship, buying too much of programs that on paper look good. There are things that we haven't done here that have done in a past life where it is, I always made sure that we tested something first before we bought the whole shebang of everything. As much as I could of, I said right now I'm going free range into conferences. That's in part because I can talk my way into being able to audit a conference, which means that I'm getting a free pass to a conference,
Sure.
as opposed to doing the, doing the investment of paying for a something that's supposed to deliver leads where I'm not sure of the quality of the leads. I'd rather go and experience it myself, even if that means that I'm putting it off for 6 months or 4 months to do the larger thing that verbally has a lot of promise, but I don't know if it's actually gonna be worth it. Like we just did that. My co-founder and I came to an event that on paper seemed to be perfect.
Okay.
And I'm glad we did that because what we watched were people avoiding the booths.
Huh.
And that often is the case. And so
Does
part of it
happen.
is, and in this case, that's not totally true. I was wondering whether people would be avoiding the booths. And what I saw was some avoiding the booths, but what I saw was because it was an engineering conference and there were heads of engineers, they were gathering as much information as they could in some cases, but they were just because they're curious about what's coming up, not because it was, I have a need and I'm going to purchase it. Like for what you do, I can imagine there's a lot more people who are really looking for the tool. And so, if they see you, they're more likely to, and they're engaging with you, they're more likely to be a sale than let me understand the newest thing in technology.
I see that. Well, so just like talking about, of course, your go-to-market tactics. What are some of those things that you tried that just fell flat?
Oh, so I would say, well, so the things that I've tried that have fallen flat, there's not honestly, there's not a lot that I've tried that's fallen flat at this point.
Wow.
I mean, I was trying to avoid saying those exact words. The thing is that um, go to market is, you're not going to believe me when I say this. Go to market is easy. Go to market is easy unless you don't know what you're doing, and then it's expensive.
Sure.
So what there are ads that we've run that have been not worth it, but we haven't done a high. We've done a very structured experiment. We never do cold outreach.
Okay.
It is something that people are still trying to convince me is a good idea. Maybe it will be at some point. I don't think it will be, but we'll see how that goes. We have what I have seen is more of certain channels that have not been successful as we had planned. So whether LinkedIn has been successful or not has to do with the quality of what's being posted. I think that webinars have, in a lot of ways, run their course.
Okay.
But what's taken its place, unless you are for a startup company, that has run its course. But workshops have gone quite well. So it's the evolving of, okay, webinars themselves are not working great, but short form video, off the charts great. Podcasts,
Yeah.
fantastic. And then and workshops I've seen work really well. So here I haven't had anything that has cratered. We've had we tested Facebook ads for like a period of time, and those were not great, but I wholeheartedly, we said we would do it. I did it. It went as I expected. It's just not it, but for some people that may work. It's just making sure that it's structured well. To me, it's more important to, it's not just the go to market for how you're getting leads, but it is in what you're doing afterward and how you create a program that is more of a scalable program.
I see that. So today, though, as you keep growing, what are some of those like tactics that you're using? Clearly, cold outreach is not it. But besides that, what are some of the tactics, that you're using that you would recommend to any other founder?
What I would recommend is the other piece of what we're doing, which is besides the tactics of getting, there's three things I would say. First of all, once you've defined your ICP well, then what you're testing how people not only respond but how they convert, and that conversion being one of the most important pieces of that. But then the other piece of it that people forget is the reason I'm able to scale fast is because of consistency. So forget about how I actually got them in the door.
Yeah.
I will say that I had said that our wedge is very consistent. It happens in our case to be things that are unique to us, but so what Mimoto does can be deployed anywhere.
Okay.
And can work in any industry. Having said that, we have a very specific wedge that is how people are using us. And then the expansion is the same. And even though we can be used anywhere, there tends to be 3 ways that we deploy. And those tend to be that we're deploying in any combination of 2 of those. So we either deploy on servers and workstations and SaaS and servers.
Got it.
And so that and not having to, not needing to customize is the name of the game. Consistency and repeatability are the name of the game when it comes to our ability to anything we're doing. We may be doing something new for a new customer, but that is something that is on the accordion of the roadmap. There is nothing that is sitting off that, oh, well, we never thought about this. And, this is going to be a $2 million contract. So we should definitely do this thing. That is, if we were to have something like that, that would require us to do so much analysis, not just in what it would take to do that, but then also what are we going to not do because of that? It's not a grab the money wherever it is. It's not a consulting business. So to create and grow a business, we need consistency. Consistency of now the industries we work in are tech and cyber tech, and then online services and financial services. Online services and financial services sound very different. It is exactly the same thing that they're buying. They're buying for the same reason. They're deploying us the same way, same use cases. The expansion is exactly the same. It goes from these specific things that then expand to the executives, that then expand to the whole organization, that then expands to their end users. Boom, 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 boom. All the same. The deployment, even though we can be anywhere, the deployment tends to be in these 3 places. So we have a consistency of how we're installing. Boom, 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 boom. It enables the, then when you get to the, then it's, where do you find the right people? And then finding the right people, it may be that it's at a different location, and the message may tweak somewhat. If it's, financial services may have a different tweak than the online services, but it tends to be that the problem statement is tweaked, not the solution. So, financial services has more regulatory. So, they're dealing with regulatory, but the issue they're having is exposure of their customers' data. Online services, exposure of their customers' data. So it ends up being the same. There's tweaks in there that are massaged, but it's a consistency. So we are able to then, because we have that consistency, we're able to build a pipeline faster or qualify out faster. So It's not that I wouldn't be opportunistic to other things, but they need to be on the, like I said, the roadmap as the go-to-market person, not the engineer. I see it as an accordion. It's somewhere on our roadmap. Then we talk about, well, how soon can we have that for you?
To me, I think sometimes I struggle with qualifying out. And that's the piece where I think I'd like to believe that I've gotten better with it, but that's where I tend to always struggle. How do you, as the founder who is building and growing fast, how do you ensure that those opportunities that are coming in that could add revenue, if they don't fit into the bucket, that you are able to qualify them out and still move on?
And that is always a challenge. The easiest qualify out is, and it's funny because you with your sales background would probably have this very different. I once told a founder who had been a CFO or had been a CISO before. I told him, said he asked for go-to-market advice, and I said, this is the only piece I'll give you. And I said that if somebody says that they're not interested, a good salesperson will say a no is a first step to a yes. You don't have that kind of time. Continue to educate them, but move on. We are, as founder sellers, moving so fast that I will pick them up later. I will continue to educate them, but they don't meet BANT. Now they, with somebody who looks like they could be, I do park a lot. Well, not a lot, but I park some at 10%.
Okay.
And so I'm parking them as like, I'll create, if they fit BANT, but I can see it's going to be a long burn. So they're getting more education than the ones who are just getting the minor amount of education. But it is, the ones that we're working harder are the ones that, how quickly can we get them into testing? And I also work with a weighted pipeline instead of just a pipeline.
Yeah.
I weight my pipeline. And once you're at the point where, I weighted all the way through, but it really is, I keep my pipeline tight also from the perspective of it only goes out 2 quarters. So I am just now adding my first opportunity out this weekend. I'll add the first opportunity that will be for Q1. Everything that's in the pipeline is within 2 quarters.
Wow.
And so it also keeps me honest in that I have to constantly be assessing that, and taking things out of pipeline. The benefit we have as the founder sellers is no one's going to beat up on us.
Yeah.
If we are being realistic and taking things out of pipeline that like we thought was going to be, I had this thing at 10% or 20%, the person I was selling to has left the company. And, at least it has to go up to 10%. But if they've left the company and what I've heard on their way out the door, like may take them off of the pipeline for a period of time. And just being honest about what's actually in pipeline, honest with ourselves,
Sure.
I find helps.
That's awesome. Yeah, I still struggle with this, but everything that you said just makes so much sense. Kris, as founders now again, someone who works with founders every day, one of the things that I tend to see is that a lot of founders don't really think through go to market the right way, or they don't really know how to think of it. So from your perspective, what are those 2 or 3 things that you would tell any founder that if you're thinking about your GTM strategy, these are 2 or 3 things that you must always consider?
One, figure out what's most important. Let me tell you right now, your open rate is not important. Your conversion to opportunity is important. Your conversion to sales is important. If you give me enough money, I can put anything in the top of a pipeline. So figure out what's most important. Figure out how to measure it.
Sure.
and how to measure it quickly. And then, don't give it too much time. And that's part of the art of it, of like giving it enough time, but not too much time. If it's not working, move on, but give it some time. There's that. I would also look at once you find what's working for you, what's an amplifier. So, whether it is a podcast to get your views out, whether it is whether it's doing media, I think all those things are great. Test your messaging. Analysts are fantastic for that. You do not have to pay for an analyst subscription to be able to get value out of it. I got Gartner Cool Vendor twice without ever having a Gartner subscription. You can get that, but you have to be delivering value. You can't be wasting somebody's time. Look for other places to test your messaging. So I speak at conferences. I speak at, I spend time with other security executives so that they can call BS on what I'm saying. Like I give my version of the world and then sit back to see if everyone who agrees with my version of the world or when I'm getting pushback on it. But that is, all those things will help the go to market. So the more that you are, the less that you're in a room with a bunch of stickers on the wall trying to figure out your messaging. Like you need to do that to a point, but then the more that you are, it's the reason I go to conferences also. Like the more you're in the wild and you talk about what's important, why it's important, you start realizing what is important to them.
I see that.
Because ultimately it's what's important to them
Yeah.
that's going to matter. It's not, can they use you for this? It is, do they have a problem and can you address the problem?
Yeah. I see that. Wow. Kris, as founders, building, one of the things that folks, think about is building an inbound plan that makes sense, but may not have the budget to execute it. What tips do you have for founders who are thinking about, building inbound with limited budgets?
Look at how to convert how to convert not on your website. Sometimes it's on your website, but there's a movement towards being less on your website. I'm terrible at names, which is the reason why I'm not throwing his name up here unless I have it like in front of me. Nope, I don't have it in front of me. I was really hoping I did. There's a expert on SEM and
Okay.
SEO who recently has written a few times about the fact that those are not being, that's not where the world's going right now. The world is very much on, and I am trying to find this as I speak with you. Here he is, Rand Fishkin,
Okay.
Fishkin. Rand has written at this point several books on inbound, and he's been posting a lot recently on looking to convert wherever you find the person. So he does a lot on LinkedIn, and that building that, how are you going to convert them sooner, and then as well as how are you going to give content that resonates with people. Those are significant. Something that's changed for me is that, we used to always throw up how soon can you throw up the form without annoying the person? And the form has gotten much further and further out. I give away way more information for free so that when somebody is actually filling out a form, or they're probably filling out a form to do a test.
Got it.
And so it is a lot more engagement before you get their contact information. If that's, if you're specifically talking inbound, but when they're there, they're way more engaged and they're way closer to, the sales process hasn't really gotten longer. It's just that there is more education that is before you have them on a form. The other thing is, depending on what you do, if you're doing things with a partner, it is I find that if you're doing something with a partner, those tend to convert faster at times because you already have the halo effect of a partner they know.
I see that. That's fine. Well, the one thing that is not really spoken out loud, Kris, is about really managing mental health as a founder. How do you, manage your mental health as you're building?
I am not always a picture of what I should do. I find that I am best when I take a break, even if it's for an hour or so at a time. So interestingly, because when we started during lockdown, I was actually better because I couldn't leave my house unless I was going to exercise. And so that got me to go for a walk for an hour a day. Now that I can leave whenever I want, it's much more difficult for me to actually leave when I'm supposed to. So I think that for me, that's something that is important. I find also that me helping others works for me. So
Wow.
I make sure that I do a certain amount a week where I am talking to other founders. People will ask for advice or different things. And it would be really easy for me to say, no, I'm really busy and I don't have time. And instead, me spending 3 to 5 hours a week and doing something for others helps disconnect me from what I'm doing. And that then I think is just overall. I had a time a few weeks ago where I was particularly having a difficult time in something I was working on. And me spending 2 hours helping others and not being able to think about how upset I was about the thing I was working on wasn't working helped me a lot.
Kris, this has been so much fun. I'd love to learn more. Like, what's next for you? What's next for Mimoto?
What's next for Mimoto is that we're at the point where we are on the cusp of scaling significantly. And so, what's next for me is finishing the seed round. What's next for Mimoto is scaling, because we have a healthy pipeline and it has a lot of end users. And so it's preparing for putting the pieces in place now so that we can roll out those end users.
That's awesome. How can folks keep up with you as well as Mimoto?
The best place right now is, we didn't go through all of my sins of what I have not done. I would say the best place right now is if you follow me on LinkedIn. There's also a Substack that I do that's called A Fork in the Road. But the reality is I repost on LinkedIn. It's a good starting place. The other reason why I would send you to LinkedIn is because at some point, all of the things that we've recorded, we will actually post. And so that really is the reason. Like it's the easiest place to go to, so that when we actually roll out all those things we're going to roll out, I'll make sure we update them there too.
That's awesome. Kris, this has been so much fun.
Thank
Such
you.
great learning from you. Thank you so much for your time today.
Well, thank you again for inviting me. Have a lovely day.
Thanks.